edition of the Stanford Business School Excellence in Leadership Award Dinner. This truly is an historic night in New York City for Stanford. We have never, ever gathered this many people together at a Stanford function in New York City, and I want to thank you all for being part of it. It's a tribute to everybody here. It's a tribute to our wonderful sponsors who are in your program, but it's especially a tribute to our great honoree that we have such a turnout. Now, just before dinner, I'd like to make 3 introductions, if you would bear with me. First, I'd like to ask all the members of the class of 2009, which is the incoming class this fall, if you would please stand so we might welcome you to the Stanford community. I think we have 18 or 20 of the members of the new class here, so welcome, and it's great to see you, and I hope everyone gets to say hello. Second, I would like to just introduce to you our honorees from prior years. We have 2 tonight. One I will introduce later, but let me ask one just to be recognized. Our very first honoree in 2003, who was a member of the MBA class of 67 and also a PhD graduate of our school in 69. He had a very long and distinguished career at Pfizer, where he retired recently as chairman and CEO. Please welcome Hank McKinnell. Hank? Hank? And then lastly, I would just like to read you a letter from members of the class of 78 who sent me a letter about 6 weeks ago. This is to Bob Joss from friends of Stephen A. Denning on his night of honor. Dear Bob, we're very pleased that you decided to honor a member of the class of 1978, and many of us are here tonight. Actually, could all of the members who are here tonight just please rise for a minute? Wow, they really are here, you know. So they said many of them would be here tonight, and by gosh, they kept their promise. And they said in their letter to me, we're modestly surprised by your selection, but we understand you chose names out of a hat from our class. And understanding that you picked the name Denning, we thought you would go for the Denning of our class, who has flair and elegance and charm and true intellectual prowess, Roberta. But instead, they said you went for the Gordon Gekko look-alike. We only have one note of caution. To say that Steve is long-winded is an understatement. During our years at the Stanford GSB, they expanded classes from 60 minutes to 90 minutes just to accommodate Steve's oratory. At Gettysburg, there were 2 prominent speakers. There was Abraham Lincoln, who spoke for 2 minutes. There was the other guy who spoke for 2 hours. You're about to honor the guy who's the other guy. Well, now so that we'll have plenty of time to enjoy the other guy, please eat fast. Enjoy the dinner. We'll be back at dessert time for our official program. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned earlier that this is really an historic evening for Stanford in New York. It's a very, very special night for Stanford, and we've never enjoyed such a remarkable group of alumni and friends at a Stanford event. It also comes at a special time, I must say, in the history of Stanford University and the history of the Graduate School of Business at Stanford. I think all of us at Stanford who are here in this room and all of us who are connected with the university have a real sense that we're part of redefining what it means to lead in higher education in the 21st century. And we're also part of reinventing what it means when we talk about management education. It's great graduate education in business. You know, many of our alumni here tonight know that for the last year or so I've been talking and writing a lot about our 3 C's. First C, new curriculum. An exciting new curriculum that'll be introduced this fall for the first time in 2007. More personalized, more challenging, more global in its context and its reach, and more about leadership and communication. It really capitalizes on Stanford and our strengths that are inherent in the business school, and it really differentiates us from other schools. The second C is new collaborations at Stanford University. And that really capitalizes on Stanford's inherent strengths. The fact that we have this incredible breadth of excellence across all the great schools, you know, a top law school, business school, medical school, engineering school, education school, all the arts and humanities, all the science and technology, all right there in one very contiguous campus. In a wonderful atmosphere, not only the climate that facilitates people coming and going to each other's school, but a collaborative atmosphere that's more entrepreneurial, I think, and certainly translational. I think everybody at Stanford wants to see knowledge and ideas move from the classroom and the research laboratory to practice, to really make a difference in the world. It's a culture that wants to take on world challenges. And it enables us to have the sort of courses that we have now at the business school, for example, where we bring doctors from the medical school together with engineers from engineering and business students to look at issues in biodesign innovation, where the doctors bring ideas for unmet clinical needs. The engineers have a way of attacking this in terms of biometrics or nanotechnology or robotics or all kinds of engineering tools. The business students in the class say, well, that's interesting, but what would it cost to make this product? How big's the market? What price could we charge? What's the source of payment? Will it scale? And you have 3 groups of students who can't possibly learn each other's specialty in the space of a 1-quarter or 2-quarter class, but they've got to get together as teams and come up with something that's medically needed, technically doable, commercially viable, just like the real world, and do it in the sense of a product idea, a prototype, and a business plan that makes it all hang together. So these are exciting kinds of innovations that are possible in this environment where we can collaborate across schools at Stanford. And the third C, exciting for us, this comes along once every 50 or 75 years, is a new campus, where we can put together the sort of physical infrastructure that allows this academic vision that's personified by the first 2 C's to really come to life, so that we can create the sort of teaching and learning spaces that make it possible for students in large lectures, small, in seminars, in breakout rooms as project teams, reassembling, that is open to the university and open to the world. And our great friend and alumnus Phil Knight has made a wonderful big down payment to help us get this campus launched. And we're particularly excited that it will be a LEED Platinum campus, that it will be really a leadership statement by a leading school of business about sustainability and being green. And then I think, as exemplified by Phil, it's going to take commitment and support from alumni to make these 3 C's happen. And it is the great genius of higher education in America that one generation enjoys an incredible opportunity to study and learn at what seems a high price, but at a cost that where only half of it is borne by the student and the other half is made possible by prior generations who want to see that the current generation enjoys that opportunity. And it is this continued passing from generation to generation that is a great hallmark of our school and our university. And I know Phil sees, as I see, that this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime chances to really dramatically reinvent ourselves and really lead in the world of management education in a very dramatic fashion. It's one of these times in our lives where organizations really matter. As you look around the world, organizations and their performance make all the difference. And when things are really well managed and well run, people benefit. Their lives are better, their quality of living, their standard of living. And when organizations don't perform well, people really get hurt, lose their jobs, lose their savings, lose their economic opportunity. And ours is a school of organizations and performance. That's what a business school is all about. And Stanford sees how critical it is to have a school that cares deeply and has insights about organization performance, to be at the heart of efforts to take on big challenges in the world, because those big challenges will require the support of managed organizations, whether it's the health of the environment and the planet, whether it's the health of humanity, whether it's the health of international institutions or of our K through 12 education system. Steve and Roberta Denning, in their support and their volunteer activity and their leadership, really set a shining example and a real standard for all of us here. And their commitment to Stanford and the business school embodies the spirit of all that we hope to achieve. To introduce Steve tonight, I can't think of anybody more appropriate than our 2005 honoree at this dinner in New York. He was a member of the class of 1971, had a long career at Merrill Lynch, where he served in his final capacity as president and chief operating officer when he left in 1999. And for the past 5 years, he's been chairman and CEO of TIAA-CREF, and has been in the midst of engineering an important and major transformation of this very, very significant institution with such an impact on higher education. So please welcome to the podium Herb Allison. Herb.
Thank you very much, Bob, and good evening, everybody. I'm truly delighted and honored to be introducing Steve Denning, who's a good friend of mine and all of you, and one of the most highly respected leaders, not just in the private equity business globally, but in the business world in general. I've had the privilege of knowing Steve for about 15 years, and I, like I think all of you, are extremely pleased that Steve is being honored tonight for his great accomplishments in many spheres with the Stanford Graduate School of Business Leadership Award. Recently, Fortune ran a story profiling Steve and describing the common elements of most successful private equity firms. And they wrote, and I'll paraphrase, that these firms attract and retain the best talent. They focus that talent well. They free them from distractions. They give them all the support they need. And they let them do what they do best. And the author, of course, could have been describing Steve's approach to leadership really in all facets of his life, both professional and personal. He's the kind of leader that I admire the most. He has big aspirations for anything that he gets involved in. And he knows that the keys to success are selecting the best talent, and we all know that he has a very keen sense of others' abilities, in setting inspiring goals and empowering people to achieve great things themselves. He's best known, of course, as the co-founder and now chairman of the private equity giant General Atlantic, which was originally established as a family investment office. But Steve had a bigger dream. He shifted the firm's focus to information technology and to other growth industries in the 1990s, and he retained that focus even as others distanced themselves from Silicon Valley after the internet bubble was punctured. Spurred by his vision, General Atlantic has grown beyond Greenwich to an independent firm managing $10 billion, and with offices from London to Dusseldorf, Mumbai, and Hong Kong, as well as New York and Palo Alto. Steve's strategy for General Atlantic is based on integration and ownership. The entire team is invested in the global activities, in their success, through a compensation program based on a combined pool of capital rather than on regional or individual returns. And it's an approach that fosters teamwork and camaraderie, the hallmarks of Steve's style. Steve has brought his big vision and his thoughtful principles to his leadership role at Stanford. As a trustee of the university and the chair of the GSB Advisory Council, Steve's commitment to Stanford is unwavering. Together with John Hennessy and Bob Joss, he's devoted much of his time to strengthening the partnerships between all areas of the university, the GSB, faculty, and alumni. His contributions to the GSB Advisory Council have been especially distinctive. Among GSB's alumni, Steve has truly been a catalyst for the school's renewed recognition and as one of the great business schools, as we all know it is, throughout the world. And he's a reason why, along with Bob and the leadership team and the Advisory Council and all the faculty, why Stanford's MBA now commands the highest premium in the marketplace, and that's perhaps the best measure of Stanford's leadership. He's extended his commitment to good governance and innovation to the Advisory Council. He's introduced executive sessions of the council to foster candid conversation and idea generation by the alumni who are so committed to the school. And he's encouraged all of us on the council to reframe the way we think about the GSB and its relations to its peers. He's pushed us all to think big and bold, both within the context of the university and of the world, so that Stanford GSB can continue to attract the best minds and educate the global leaders of the future. And to support those aims, the GSB is considering a new campus, as Bob mentioned, another of Steve's suggestions. And to ensure that all these good ideas can come to fruition, Steve is co-chairing the Stanford Challenge, the university's capital campaign, as well as raising substantial sums for the GSB. And so I hope that all of you brought your checkbooks here tonight, because Steve will be at the door on our way out collecting personally. Now, Steve not only contributes greatly to Stanford, he owes quite a bit to Stanford. It is, after all, where he met his wife, Roberta Bowman, who is also a 78 grad of GSB, as we know, and a 75 grad of Stanford's college. Roberta has been a staunch supporter of Stanford over the years, promoting arts education and serving on the advisory council of the university's School of Humanities and Sciences. So please join me in welcoming Roberta. And let's also welcome Steve and Roberta's daughter, Carrie, who's a junior at Stanford. And their son, Robert, who attended the Stanford Institute, recently graduated from Columbia. And he's now studying at the London School of Economics. I don't know what happened to Stanford's business school, but there he is. Steve Denning, in addition to serving as the director of the Thomson Corporation and several General Atlantic public and private portfolio companies, contributes to education and society in many other important ways. He's on the advisory board of the School of Economics and Management at Tsinghua University in Beijing. He's vice chairman of the National Parks Conservation Association and a director of the American Museum of Natural History. He's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a trustee of the Connecticut Science Center. And previously, he served as a trustee of the Georgia Tech Foundation and a director of the Nature Conservancy of Wyoming and New York. And given his love of skiing, I'm sure that we can count on Steve to do something about global warming in the years ahead. As all of you know who know Steve, when you're in Steve's presence, you can't help but be infused by his passion, his commitment, his confidence, and his extremely high standards. And if any of you want more evidence of all that, let me introduce to you this year's recipient of the Leadership Award from Stanford's Graduate School of Business, Steve Denning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think after that introduction, I ought to sit down. Thank you very much, Herb. Let me just, before I get into my prepared remarks that you will need to settle down for. Um, 2 points of clarification. First, I am the other guy. And secondly, these pictures, that was the first day of business school. I had one date with Roberta after that. I got the pink slip. I subsequently shaved, came back for a second try, and it worked out. I am extremely honored to be receiving the 2007 Leadership Award here tonight. And I'm also deeply grateful because it was the business school that provided me the platform, in the broadest sense of the word, to be able to accomplish what I have over the past 29 years. Frankly, I never expected to be standing here tonight. And as I think most of you know, most of my friends never thought that would be the case either. After this picture, you understand why. As one of my classmates indicated in an email to me when he was notified, I am totally supportive of the embarrassment this affair will hopefully put you through. But on a serious note, what I would like to do tonight is talk to you about 2 factors that have played a very significant role in my life, namely serendipity and people. And then, if you will, indulge me for a few minutes in a subject in which I am passionate about, and that is globalization, an interest of mine which has been instrumental in the development of General Atlantic and which I believe is critical to all of us. First, let me talk about serendipity, or as some might say, luck. Some people believe that they will realize success simply because of who and what they are, and that they will succeed independent of the context. Others, like me, believe you work very hard to prepare yourself, and that other people drive events or provide opportunities upon which you are able to capitalize, or as the saying goes, make your own luck. As Seneca said more eloquently, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I can tell you, I have had a number of these opportunities. Let me just describe a few. First, the suggestion by my father in 1965 to take the Naval ROTC exam, which resulted in my attending Georgia Tech and serving in the Navy for 6 years, rather than attending college in my home state of Utah. As a result, I was only one of 2 students in my graduating high school class of almost 500 who went out of state to college. Second, the question posed by the McKinsey recruiter in 1977. Would I be interested in working in the summer in Amsterdam? And of course, I asked him whether or not he was referring to Amsterdam, New York, or Amsterdam in the Netherlands. He indicated the latter, and the result was my first real exposure to what was referred to at the time as international business. A third example was the chance meeting of Bill Meehan in the Skydeck of macroeconomics in the first year of business school, beginning a friendship that resulted in our subsequently swapping offices, he going to San Francisco and my going to New York so I could be with Roberta, who had just accepted a job with Time Inc. I then offered to lead Stanford recruiting for the New York office of McKinsey, which is where I met Ed Cohen, who in turn, some 2 years later, when I decided to leave McKinsey, offered me a job to join General Atlantic. And lastly, the decision in 1981 by a first-year GSB student, 10 minutes into the interview for a summer associate position at GA, that she was not the right individual for the job. But if I would give her a few minutes, she would go find that person whom she thought would be a perfect fit. That person was Dave Hodgson, who has been with GA for 25 years and has been central to our success. I am a firm believer that serendipity plays a large role in the opportunities afforded you. But how do you prepare yourself to be able to respond and react to these seemingly random events? In my case, I have consciously put myself in situations that I knew would be challenging and would require both professional and personal growth. Frequently, when I decided to pursue these more uncertain but potentially more rewarding courses of action, I was often quite aware that I might not be successful. But I also knew myself well enough to know that I was much better in situations that were challenging and where success was not assured than the reverse. But I have realized that you never do it alone. You do it with people and with their assistance. Most of us adhere to the adage about hiring the best people. But I would argue that it is not just about surrounding yourself with the top talent because of what these people do and can do, but more importantly, the role these people play in shaping what you do and strive to do. I believe that an essential part of leadership is having that right group of people around you, who in turn become such instrumental aspects of your career and of your life. These are your colleagues, your mentors, and your friends. And that first step for me in assembling that right group of people was the decision which I made while still in the Navy in 1976 to accept the offer to attend Stanford Business School. Now, I sincerely believe in what the GSB represents in terms of the quality of the faculty and the depth of the education. But it was my fellow classmates that were the distinguishing factor for me. While the classroom content was critical to developing problem-solving skills, it is your classmates who become your colleagues and friends, who have that enduring impact and continue to shape you after you have graduated. In fact, a small number of these friends from business school have evolved into the equivalent of family. We have had the joy of being involved with each other's children and the development of their lives, and the deep satisfaction of sharing life's successes and challenges. Post-business school, two other groups have played an important role in who I am and what I've achieved: McKinsey and General Atlantic. Now, I was only at McKinsey for a little over 2 years, so it was somewhat like a postgraduate experience for me. But again, it was the people I met while at the firm that had and have had an instrumental impact on me. Some have become lifelong colleagues and close family friends. These people and their extended families, some of whom are here tonight, have influenced and shaped me, my ideas, and my outlook in a myriad of ways. Now, the second group is General Atlantic, a firm I joined in December of 1980. When I joined it, it had one other investment professional. And despite the attractiveness of joining such an entity, I gave the decision a lot of thought because of my desire to be around and involved with a larger, more diverse group of people with whom I could interact and learn. But I decided to join General Atlantic, and over time we were able to assemble that right group. Today we have over 150 people in 7 offices around the world, bound together with a culture that is team-oriented, is committed to excellence, and is based on a common set of values. This is a group I take great pride in having helped assemble, and it is a group that I had the great satisfaction in having had the opportunity to lead. It is a group that is focused, as Herb said, on what we are in business to do, and that is to build great companies with lasting value. We don't invert our focus and concentrate simply on returns. Rather, we attempt to build great companies, knowing that if we do, we will in fact deliver the superior returns that our capital partners expect. In fact, those capital partners and the management teams at the portfolio companies are part of a broader group that has had a defining impact on what we have been fortunate enough to accomplish as a firm. But this broad group is much more than business colleagues. For me, they have been and are essential mentors, trusted advisors, and irreplaceable friends. One of the reasons why people have had such a huge impact on shaping who I am relates to me as an individual. I am someone who learns in the context of other people, and is stimulated by being in their presence. Some folks get their best ideas when reading, others when they are alone in deep thought. I do my best thinking and am the most creative, to the extent that I am either, when I am meeting and interacting with other people. Thus, I have not only grown as an individual, but I've been able to have a much more meaningful contribution as a result of the people around me. Now, one group that I just briefly mentioned at the beginning that has been constantly around me, but I have not yet mentioned in any direct sense, is my family. My wife, Roberta, whom I met in business school, and I might describe that as the classic case of presumed preparation meeting opportunity, and our children, Robert and Carrie. It is self-evident to all who know me that they have been the defining group. Their unwavering love, support, patience, and understanding has been essential. Now let me address, it will be the final subject, I wanted to mention this evening, and that is globalization. It's a topic on which some would say that I'm relentless, maybe even a tad maniacal, or maybe even monotonous. But it is also a topic in which I have real passion. It is somewhat ironic that today I have this interest, given that I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'd never traveled outside the 5 contiguous western states prior to my senior year in high school. Had never been on an airplane before flying to Georgia Tech. Had never traveled or lived outside the United States until midway through my 6 years in the Navy, and that was on a Greek Air Force base in Crete. But as I mentioned, the seeds of my interest in globalization were from my McKinsey summer in 1977 in Amsterdam. I was assigned to a fascinating project, namely how to improve the competitiveness of the Netherlands versus the other members of the European Union. After this study, I returned to Stanford and decided to take as many international business courses as I could. Upon joining McKinsey, my emerging interest and the summer experience led me, luckily, to an initial assignment being an international project, which in turn led to others, the net of which resulted in my spending over half of my time while at McKinsey on international business. Then I moved to General Atlantic, and my international exposure was somewhat dormant until we began investing in a few software businesses in the 1980s. As these businesses grew, about 1/3 of their revenues ultimately came from customers outside the United States. In fact, the insight we gained from the international aspects of these businesses was instrumental in our choosing to refocus GA's business globally in the early 1990s. Today, GA has offices around the world, and about half of our 50-plus portfolio companies are domiciled outside the United States. They represent about 45% of our overall portfolio market value. But the global orientation is even further reinforced when you look at total employment in these portfolio companies. About 75% of the total employees reside outside the U.S. Now let me shift to a macroeconomic context. Today, as many of you know, China is the 5th largest economy in the world, and India is the 10th. And the two are projected to be the largest economies in the world sometime around 2035, 2040. I think we also heard today how China first quarter grew 11.1%. With that, the U.S. will slip to 3rd. But these changes and the implications that flow from these macroeconomic dynamics are difficult to fully comprehend. For example, as a result of the growth in Asia, it is projected that we will witness, in the next 25 years, the emergence of the single largest middle class in the history of the world, or almost 800 million people. If you shift to trade, global trade as a percentage of world GDP has increased from about 10% in 1970 when I graduated from college to over 30% as of last year, and as you would expect, is projected to continue to increase. This rapid rise in trade is indicative of nations becoming increasingly interconnected and interdependent, economically and otherwise. With the global integration of our national economies accelerating, it is not just tangible products or manufactured goods that will be traded, but also services, a sector that is traditionally viewed as non-tradable. But as global labor arbitrage continues and services become increasingly tradable, it will drive change in our country that is as dramatic as what happened to agriculture as a result of the Industrial Revolution, and as significant as what has happened and is happening to manufacturing services as we continue the transition to a world economy that is knowledge-based and service-driven. Let me give you a couple statistics that can amplify these structural shifts. Agricultural employment as a percentage of total employment started its decline in the late 1800s and now represents less than 2% of total jobs. While manufacturing employment peaked in 1973 when it represented over 35% of the total. Today, manufacturing is around 20%, and services, on the other hand, represent almost 80% of U.S. jobs. And globalization is not driven by macroeconomics alone, but will be impacted by other potent forces like demographic and cultural change. It is the interplay and confluence of these changes that will shape the aggregate forces of globalization in the decades ahead. But if you listen to most of our politicians and many in the press, you would think that globalization is a choice, when in fact it is a reality that we need to face as individuals, as leaders, and as a nation. With or without us, the 21st century will globalize, and the 9 billion plus people on the planet at that point will reap the benefits of globalization or bear the brunt of the forces. I would contend that our inability or unwillingness as a nation to grapple with some of the world's most vexing problems and to develop adaptive policies to address areas like climate change, energy independence, homeland security, immigration, and yes, even K through 12 education, all stem from a myopia that ignores global realities and the U.S.'s changing role in the world. Our context is wrong, and as a result, we are not pursuing solutions that recognize the implications of globalization, nor are we pursuing solutions that represent the urgent need for timely change. I truly hope that our national leaders will begin to define a new, more inclusive global vision for the country, stop pandering to the public, and help them understand the need to address the ramifications directly and immediately. An informed view of the realities of globalization should be an impetus for action for all of us. As a nation, we must begin to address the causes rather than the symptoms of this globally induced change. Change that we must recognize. Is that the stop bell there? I think it must be. I'll finish my last point here. Rather than the symptoms, as a nation, we must begin to address the causes rather than the symptoms of this globally induced change. Change that we must recognize we cannot stop, but to which we must adapt. Let me just finish on the point that I started with at the beginning, and that's what each and every one of you represent in this room tonight. What has been important to me and what has especially been meaningful in my life is the special relationships and friends that each and every one of you represent, and I thank you.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for those stirring remarks, and thank you for allowing us to honor you as our 2007 honoree of the Stanford Business School Excellence in Leadership Award. It's a great pleasure to present you the actual award, and just to say how proud we are of you and for your affiliation with Stanford, how proud we are of your accomplishments, but especially how proud we are that you're the kind of person you are, so that we could suitably honor you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank our wonderful sponsors who were so generous with their time and table contribution. You have one leadership exercise you must perform at each table, and that is figure out who gets to take home the lovely flowers. We look forward to seeing you again next year in New York City. Good evening, drive safely, and see you soon. Bye.